The update is here and there is plenty to talk about. Hello and welcome to Epic Flail 40k Tactics. My name's Luke, and this week I will be mostly talking about core rules updates and what they mean for the game. I won't be focusing on the points updates because there's going to be lots of content out there around that. What I want to focus on, as I mentioned, are the rules updates and also the updates to the Pariah Nexus Tournament Companion. I've gone through all the documents to save you some time, so by the end of this video you'll have a really solid idea about what's changed. Starting with the core rules update. If you're not familiar with these documents, the revised text is going to be red, and anything with highlighted text is an update to what was originally written, covered off in a previous update. So for the purpose of this video, I'm going to be sticking with just the red text. And right out the gate, we have, in the spirit of this whole update, the general neatening of rules, surge moves. Some rules enable units to make out-of-phase surge moves. For example, when Khorne Berserker's blood surge ability triggers, one of the model dies as a result of being shot. Essentially, the 3 bullet points here make it so that we've got some real clarity over how many times it can actually do a surge per phase, whether or not it can if it's battle shocked, and whether or not it can if it's within engagement range of one or more enemy units, i.e. if you're in combat with something and then they fire pistols at you, you can't then make a surge move and move around in combat randomly, which is great. Just tidies that up and stops some of the silliness that some players may have been trying to suggest works when it doesn't. And again, in the spirit of neatening the rules out, we've got some rules around leaders, essentially adding the 2 clauses in red to the existing text, and that's each time the last model in a bodyguard unit is destroyed, each character unit that is part of the attached unit, and this is the new bit now, is no longer part of an attached unit. So what this is essentially saying is it's making it crystal clear that as soon as the character is left alone, when all of the last bodyguards have been shot, it's no longer part of an attached unit. And the common questions I would get as an event organizer would be, I've got this unit here as part of another unit, am I going to score certain secondaries if only the bodyguard models die? Like no prisoners, for example. Things like that. And this is just reiterating on the wording to make that crystal clear. And for anyone who played this game quite a while now, it's not a new rule as such, but it's adding that clarity around these sorts of things. And again, that's the same thing in that second paragraph. Next up, we have some clarity around damage. If an attack is subject to a rule that changes its damage characteristic to 0, as well as another rule that applies a negative modifier to its damage characteristic to a minimum of 1, what happens? Well, we've got a nice clear-cut answer. The damage characteristic is changed to 0. A very simple ruling and sensible. Someone trying to perhaps rule that one effect can offer help to get around another worse effect, which is absolutely not the intent there, so that's a really good one. Then we've got an FAQ around timing or sequencing. So if a unit is destroyed and that same unit is later returned to the battlefield, like Angron or Saint Celestine, do any persisting effects that applied to the unit when it was destroyed continue to apply? So something like judgment tokens, Oath of Moment. This is a great question. So yes, within the timing limitations of those persisting effects. Note that this does not apply when you're instructed to add a new unit to your army, such as when using the Astra Militarum reinforcements stratagem. That's really cool. As much as I dislike Votann, the judgment tokens, Oath of Moment, it kind of makes sense. They're still very much the character or unit that was the target of these persisting effects. They haven't suddenly changed their identity. The opposite is true of the reinforcement stratagem. That is a brand new unit. So this is a really sensible application of rules as intended, and fantastic ruling hopefully gets around a lot of confusion. When a model is destroyed, until it has been removed from the battlefield, does it continue to benefit from all its abilities and any aura abilities it is within range of? And do its own aura abilities continue to affect eligible units within range of them? Yes, in all cases. Love that. I'm struggling to think of a scenario where this has even been asked. Maybe something that had a Feel No Pain aura, but also had Deadly Demise. So it would lose its final wound, trigger Deadly Demise, but then the units around it would benefit from the aura of Feel No Pain before you removed the model. Something like that. This strikes me as something that probably doesn't come up that often, but when it does, it's a bit of a head scratcher. So again, nice to see a ruling on that. Some rules take effect at the start of a phase, turn or battle round, or another rule takes effect during the same phase, turn or battle round without specifying the start. Can the latter rule take effect before all of those other rules are resolved? In most cases, no. Rules that take effect at the start of a phase, turn, or battle round must be fully resolved before any rules that do not specify that take effect at the start of the battle round. Well, yeah. The exception to this is that if you use a rule that takes effect at the start of a phase or turn, and your opponent has a rule that explicitly triggered as a result of your rule taking effect, their rule can take effect at the time stated. For example, if a 1000 Sun player uses Doombolt to inflict a mortal wound on their opponent's Custodian's unit, with one of those mortal wounds allocated, the opponent can immediately use the Arcane Genetic Alchemy stratagem to grant the Feel No Pain, since that stratagem is triggered just after a wound has been allocated. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Very, very wordy, but yeah, you do the order of things, but then if you trigger something else, then that might then trigger something else. And that's fine, you do the thing that you trigger. Nice. Again, clarity, which is what I'm really loving about these FAQs and core rules updates. I love this one, this question here. Do you have to basically move when you do a surge move? No, you can move any distance up to the result. Brilliant. If a rule enables a unit to make an out-of-phase surge move, and I'm going to hold my hand up, this is definitely something I've been guilty of. So if a rule enables a unit to make an out-of-phase surge move determined by a dice result, for example, the D6 by a Berserker's unit, can I choose not to move the unit after seeing the dice result? Yes, but your unit still counts as having made that move, even if you choose to move it 0. So if you remember the ruling earlier, you can only surge move once in your turn. So I did this only yesterday, in fact, rolled the dice for a surge move and didn't like the result, so I said, I'm not going to move. And then the unit got shot again, and I rolled again to try and get a better result. And what this is telling us is that that's not allowed. So that's really good to have some clarity on that, because I just didn't realise that wasn't a thing. So that's great to have that on paper. I apologise to my opponent, but they still beat me anyway, so it's all good. So if my opponent uses the Fire Overwatch stratagem to shoot at a unit from my army and destroys one or more of its models, and then I use a rule that enables that unit to make an out-of-phase surge move that brings my unit within engagement range of one or more enemy units, can any models in my unit continue to resolve the move that triggered that use of the Fire Overwatch stratagem, i.e. a normal, advanced, fallback, or charge move? No. Conversely, if your opponent used the Fire Overwatch stratagem at the start of your unit's move, and that move was insufficient to bring your unit within engagement range, your unit can continue to resolve that original move as normal. Oh, so you could be moving a unit and then someone overwatches you, and then you use this surge move and it gets you some free movement. That's really interesting. But if that move gets you into combat, then you're basically stuck in combat and you can't do the rest of your move. That's hilarious. Good to know. Next, we have ruins and visibility. So this is adding to the clause there, basically saying for the purposes of visibility into or through a ruin, visibility to and from such a model that overhangs its base is determined only by the base and parts of the model that do not overhang the base. Been reading this for a little bit, and unless I'm very much mistaken, but I don't think this actually adds anything different than what was already brought in on the last wave of updates around visibility, ruins. Nothing new on this one. Now I want to move into the Pariah Nexus Tournament Companion updates. And these are pretty big, but before I do, you should check out Epic Flower HQ. I regularly update members-only content there. For $2.99 a month on Epic Flower HQ, you get access to those additional members' videos, as well as a whole raft of battle reports, podcasts, After Dark members shows that we do. Not only that, we have an ever-growing Discord where we talk all things 40k, and there's even a Sigmar section now. Boo! Memes, list advice, meetups, all sorts of stuff. And we've also been streaming some UKTC events too. Next week, Paul and Rob are going to Coventry, so if you don't want to miss that, subscribe and set up your notifications so you don't miss out on any of the games. Pariah Nexus Tournament Companion. It starts off with the first page of the Tournament Companion, and that's under Determined Missions. And what I really like about this is they're making the point here to say, don't just draw stuff randomly, you should use the pre-generated missions. That's really good. This is the little pamphlet you get with the Pariah Nexus cards. If you don't buy the card, you just use the app and that's what you need, then this is a big chunk of what's on that pamphlet. And number 4 and number 5 around the objective markers and creating the battlefield, it just elaborates and clarifies how you're set up. So for the vast majority of players who will be familiar with the game, these don't really change anything. But what I really love about all 3 of these points is it's laying out really clearly how to set up the battlefield for matched play in a way that levels the playing field as much as possible for 2 new players that don't know how to play. And this is taking away a lot of the mental load, confusion, uncertainty around how to create a fair, balanced playing experience. You haven't got to waste time thinking, how do we actually set up for a game here? Actually, no, I can set up the battlefield in the right way and feel really comfortable that this is how I'm supposed to be doing this, and that's actually going to create an interesting experience rather than just realizing we've created something imbalanced and investing a bunch of time into a game which is not going anywhere because it's been heavily favoring one person by mistake, and we didn't really know that because we're new. So loving this. And next we have the thing that's got me the most excited about the updates, and that is the amendment to secret missions. So the second bullet point, in the 5th battle round, you cannot score any VPs from the primary mission card. I find this really interesting, as this essentially prevents you from not having to engage in the game too much if you've gone second. Pariah Nexus heavily favours someone that's gone second in a lot of the missions, because you can, in the 5th battle round, get a lot of points at the end of the battle and not have to expose your army as much as the person who's gone first in order to do that. And what this can ultimately lead to is scenarios where behind a little bit on primary, but you're evening it out on secondaries and the scores are fairly close. You're going second, you've been able to commit to a secret mission. Both opponents are being quite cagey, knowing that there's going to be a set amount of primary scored as the game goes on. No one's making any big pushes or plays. It plays right into the hands of that person who's gone second, because then they can just jump out in the final turn, having the final activation without any repercussion, and score a boatload of points, grabbing a secret mission and then scoring some last extra primary points as well in the last turn to swing a game around. This significantly limits that, because if you're in a situation where you've taken a bit of a hammering on primary, you commit to that secondary mission, not scored primary particularly well in the 2nd and 3rd turn, and now you've committed. Suddenly you've only got round 4 to score on the primary mission. And if you're not in a position where you can score big on turn 4 without exposing your army, then you're not going to get any points on turn 5. So it limits the amount that, particularly if you're going second, you can sit back, hide, not engage as much, and leap out and sit on objectives in the last turn and just rack up a whole bunch of points out of nowhere. Significantly reduces that. Actually forces us to really try and maximize how many primary points we can get to get the most out of our primary plus secondary mission cards, bearing in mind the cap. So I really like this change, as you can sometimes see with certain missions and matchups. I had it at LGT. I played a game with a really nice opponent, Sam. He had a lot of Obliterators, Vindicators, very shooty Chaos Army against my very shooty Bringers of Flame. We had a bit of a standoff for quite a few turns, and then Sam going second would have been able to push out, having the final turn, and be the person that doesn't have to commit first to scoring and getting points, versus me, who went first and have to try and push out every time to get those objectives. You can really tailor your lists to secret missions if you want to, and this is a nice little touch that takes away some of the sting out of going first in Pariah Nexus, which is really interesting, because historically it's all about wanting to go first in 40k. You want to go first, you want to get in, you want to do some damage, and with Pariah Nexus it's completely been the other way. People often lament going first, and this is a really interesting change that shakes that up a bit, and definitely something that we all now need to be bearing in mind if we're going to be going for a secret mission card. Yes, I've got a virtual certainty that I'm going to get the secret mission, that's great, but actually, are you going to get the secret mission and be able to score enough primary if we can't score in the 5th turn? It's okay to be a little bit behind on primary and then use round 4 to top that up a bit, but if we're really behind, then actually doing the secret mission could really, really hurt us if we're not careful and haven't factored in that we can't score in the 5th battle round. And then we also have some updates on the Pariah Nexus mission cards. These are largely just neatening up and correcting any of the uncertainty that existed on some of the cards. These are all fairly self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go over those too much. And in the Pariah Nexus mission FAQs, Mark for Death they've made worse. So if you've got a leader and a bodyguard unit, when you select Mark for Death, you have to kill the bodyguard unit and one of the characters. Mark for Death can be a real pain and almost impossible to score in many board states, and they've just made it even more frustrating. And the last 3 questions are questions that range from I can't believe someone asked this to some nice clarifications. So again, not going to go through those in any great detail. They are all fairly self-explanatory. So what do you make of the changes, in particular the mission thing? How big a deal do you think that's going to be in games of Pariah Nexus? Let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you're enjoying this kind of content, then check out my last video that I made on the right way to play by intent. If, like me, you're a big fan of being crystal clear with getting rid of some of the ambiguities, then you're going to love this video, as it discusses some of the best ways to communicate and have really fun, engaging games of 40k, cutting through misunderstandings and being really clear and intentional with how we play. But that's all from me for now. In the meantime, thanks very much for watching. Keep rolling those dice and stay tuned for more.